Let's try and get your week started. Live from New York City this morning. Good morning. Your equity market down by 0.7% on the S&P. The countdown to the Open starts right now.
Everything you need to get set for the start of U.S. trading. This is Bloomberg The Open with Jonathan Ferro.
Live from New York, coming up, conflict between Israel and Hamas entering a third day. Crude oil rallying as tensions fan regional flames, and Iran rejecting reports it was directly involved. We begin with the big issue, Israel at war.
כוחות חמאס פלשו הבוקר לשטח ישראל בבוקרו של יום חג, שבת.
And President Biden pledging his support for Israel.
Today, the people of Israel are under attack, orchestrated by a terrorist organization, Hamas. In this moment of tragedy, I want to say to them and to the world and to terrorists everywhere that the United States stands with Israel. We will not ever fail to have their back.
The Wall Street Journal reporting Iranian security officials helped Hamas plan its attack in a series of meetings over months, saying Hamas was given the green light for the attack in Beirut last Monday. Secretary Blinken telling CNN over the weekend that he's seen no evidence to support that claim.
In this specific instance, we have not yet seen evidence that Iran directed or was behind this particular attack, but there's certainly a long relationship. It's one of the reasons why we have been resolutely taking action against Iran and its support for terrorists and terrorist proxies.
Joining us now is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie here in New York City. AMH, before we get into it, the question we have to answer this morning is whether Israel will directly implicate Iran for the tragic events over the weekend. We caught up with the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, a little bit earlier this morning. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Iran supports the Shia militias in Iraq. They're trying to establish a beachhead, a terrorist beachhead against Israel and Syria. Now our working assumption is that they may have. Our working assumption a couple of days ago was that they hadn't known about it directly. Now it is unclear, and we'll have to wait to verify it. And, you know, when we make an official statement, we'll make an official statement. You can imagine the sense of disgust that we have. We have to send a message to all of Israel's enemies because we're a strong country, but we're tiny, and we can go from strength to vulnerability. I think people are going to see the strength of Israel, the might of Israel.
Anne-Marie, that working assumption has changed.
Yeah, it certainly has. And Jonathan, I've been speaking to U.S. officials and other individuals really around the world that have put a lot of cold water on that Wall Street Journal report that Iran had given the green light. And there was meetings leading up to this between Hezbollah, Hamas, and those in part of the IRGC of Iran that would have implicated Iran directly. And you asked Ron Dermer, which we should note, a former ambassador from Israel to the United States. He is a top confidant of Prime Minister Netanyahu. And when you asked him about direct evidence that would leak Iran to this massacre over the weekend, he said, it is our working assumption that there is that evidence. They have not come out directly to name what that evidence is, but that is their working assumption right now. And of course, if Iran is implicated in this, that can have serious risks to the broader region and instability, not just in the Middle East, but the globe. Anne-Marie,
from your perspective this morning, what are you focused on what next? What next in all of this?
Well, I think what next in all of this, you want to see if other individuals get involved in backing Hamas, the likes of Hezbollah, the likes of the Houthis. Also, we have learned this morning from the State Department that 9 Americans were killed. Obviously, Jonathan, many Americans potentially are still missing. Are there Americans that were taken hostage? This is something that the U.S. is trying to, the administration is trying to work and figure out. Of course, all of this comes at a precarious position for Washington, D.C. As you mentioned a number of times today, we still do not have an appointed or confirmed Israeli ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Israel, Jack Lew. But on October 18th, Punchbowl News is reporting that he will get that committee hearing. And then, of course, there's no Speaker of the House yet. Paralysis, really, in Washington, D.C. as they deal with this international tragedy.
And nothing's been happening quickly in Washington, D.C. for a long, long time. Do you see this providing a game-changing incentive to get a move on, to change our approach to certain issues in the nation's capital?
Some analysts are saying that this can be an impetus to potentially we can get a faster speaker or also make sure that the government remains open coming November 17th. And potentially, as we do know, that there's been a lot of discussions about aid to Ukraine. Paramount at this moment in conversations in Washington will be about aid to Israel as well.
MH, thank you. Stay close. We'll catch up with Anne-Marie through the hour here in New York City. I want to continue the conversation now with Henrietta Trays of Vader Partners. Henrietta, first of all to you, this is a tremendously difficult question to ask, but just from your standpoint, your perspective, how do you expect this will unfold across the region?
I mean, my hope is that we see the invasion of Israel really shake some things loose here in D.C., as you were just discussing with Anne-Marie. The region obviously is going to need a tremendous amount of aid. And what we've seen from the war in Ukraine is one of the first things the United States do is tries to build a coalition. Obviously, the administration has been working with Middle East nations for the last couple of months to a year to try to bring together a more strategic, coordinated approach here, but they're struggling with that, as you saw from Egypt yesterday. So I think it'll be difficult to tie the Middle East nations together, but this should be an area that the U.S. can immediately tap into goodwill. There's already conversations about aid coming in from Germany. So look to those NATO nations to sort of band together in their approach to Israel and providing aid right now, whether that's on the military front or from a funding perspective, which I think will be, per Israel's prime minister, something that we are dealing with for many weeks, if not months from now.
Henrietta, we have a decent understanding of America's willingness to assist. Can we talk about America's ability to assist, given the absence that we have in certain key positions across government? In the House, no speaker, no ambassador to Israel, to Lebanon, to Egypt. Does that change anything?
I mean, as I said to clients last night, I mean, I'm hoping that this could be one silver lining where this disaster and catastrophe sort of creates impetus to move, as you were just discussing. So one of the things I'd like to see happen here is Israeli aid move the speaker's election along. The internal fighting on the Republican side is so exhaustive that I'm not particularly optimistic. They're not in session today. They'll start having the first round of understanding of who the speaker is going to be on Tuesday, potentially a vote within the conference on Wednesday, and maybe, if we're very lucky, a speaker's vote on Thursday. But that'll be day 5, 6 of this now war. So obviously it's not going to be immediate. The Senate is out of session until October 17th. So you're not going to be getting a robust aid package. But what I'm optimistic about is aid to Israel can carry things like aid to Ukraine, maybe even a defense appropriations bill. And, you never want to waste a disaster, is the phrasing in D.C. And I think the Senate hopefully will take up that narrative and run with it.
It's often an unfortunate phrasing, but with that in mind, do you think it's now less likely we get a government shutdown November 17th?
I'm not particularly optimistic about that. I think we need to start splicing and dicing whether it's going to be a full government shutdown or partial. One of the things I could see happening here is the defense appropriations bill, or maybe something funding the State Department, is able to ride along with an Israel plus Ukraine aid package. In that scenario, you've got military workers paid. You have most of the military bases covered for the year. You have aid to Israel and Ukraine. And everything else sort of goes to the back burner. So we could have a shutdown that's partial, but potentially protracted as they try to work through individual appropriations bills. And I think what freshman members of the House do not understand is there's a reason that we lump these pieces of legislation together. It's to speed it along precisely when we have the opportunity. Otherwise, huge chunks of the government will remain unfunded for days, if not weeks.
That's the dysfunction at home. Let's talk about the prospect of escalation abroad. It's still unclear as yet, Henrietta, what Iran's direct involvement was over the weekend. Given the approach that we've seen from the administration to Iran over the last year or so, do you see that changing in a material way? And if so, how?
I mean, what we've seen from them so far is a very deliberate approach to collecting information, how they release information. We have to be mindful that it's an election year here in the United States. So there's already a number of presidential candidates jumping at this opportunity to cry foul, to say that there's something afoot that is President Biden's responsibility somehow. I mean, I think that narrative is going to be inescapable for the White House, and why you're seeing administration officials try to jump out in front of it. And it needs to be deliberate. You need to have exactly the right information before you start going out with it. But a number of presidential candidates don't necessarily feel like they need to wait for that. And we've seen that play out since the weekend.
Henrietta, thank you for an update from you. Henrietta Trays there of Vader Partners. To continue the conversation, joining us now is City's Kristen Bitterly, Aberdeen's Luke Hickmore. Kristen, first to you. Do you suppose this can lead to a durable headwind to market sentiment, the events that we've seen over the weekend and the spillover this morning and beyond?
It's hard to say in terms of the reaction short term and longer term. It is one more catalyst for volatility. I think when we look at the initial market reaction, obviously with bond markets closed in the US, it is a risk off sentiment. You can see that in terms of the bid for gold, bid for the dollar, and of course the jump that we saw in oil. I think the major indicator to keep an eye on right now is obviously oil. And so this debate, John, that you were talking about in terms of Iran's involvement, it only complicates this given the fact that their oil output is up about 55% since the lows of 2020. And so the key to understanding whether this would have broader implications is clearly the scope of the regional conflict and then the pressures that it would put on in areas like the oil market.
Crude up 3.5% this morning, WTI at about 86, Brent crude at about 87. Luke Hickmore, what can you learn from the way the market has responded so far?
That we don't know enough. I think, as you've been talking about, if this widens out, if Iran gets sucked in, we can see Jordan get sucked in and potentially Russia get sucked in. John Arthurs did a brilliant note this morning from Bloomberg talking about the concentric circles around Israel and its defense risks. And ultimately, on the outside of that is Russia. So I think as an investor, you need to start preparing for what you could be facing over the next few weeks. Right now, it doesn't feel anything more than the market's done already. It's quite a small reaction. If we go through those circles, we need to be getting more and more defensive as we get further on. And also, John, I think there's a chance here that a higher oil price is a brake on growth rather than a driver to inflation, given everything we've gone through to get to this point with higher yields, higher interest rates and slower growth.
Luke, it raises the question, what is defensive? Are Treasury bonds defensive, given what you expect?
That's really hard, especially the amount that needs to be funded over the next year, the interest payments coming up as well. That's really hard, isn't it? I think possibly actually quality companies, a value trade, if you will, rather than the growth trade, who've got good income streams that are domestically oriented rather than looking for international exposure. And the same whether you're looking at it in from credit or from equities, and maybe keep right down the front end of the US Treasury curve in that 5-year space, or even cash.
This was a real test for us this morning. Unfortunate in some ways that the Treasury market was closed. A real test, Kristen, to understand whether Treasuries have retained those risk mitigation characteristics, given the sell-off we have seen over the last couple of weeks, the last few months. The question I'd often ask, when bad things happen, we buy Treasuries. When bad things happen now, Kristen, are we still buying Treasuries?
I think the interesting thing will be to see in terms of whether there's really a bid for the 10-year. I think certainly what you've seen in terms of bills and the demand for cash as an asset class, we know that's been the #1 trade this year, and we've seen significant inflows into that. I think in terms of like your question around where you can hide out, from a quality perspective, I see a lot more coming into 2 to 5 years where you're getting that above 5% and even 6% on investment grade corporates. So I think the question is, you know, the 10-year, who is the buyer for the 10-year in this market? And if there is a flight to quality, are we going to see that when the market opens?
That's not an easy question to answer at the moment. Kristen Bidley, Luke Hickmore sticking with us. We'll build on this going into the opening bout. The opening bout about 17 minutes away. Equities pulling back. Off session lows, though. We're down about 0.5% on the S&P with some movers going into the open. Here's Abby.
Well, John, as we do have the conflict between Israel and Hamas entering a third day, we have a risk-off tone for the markets, not surprisingly. This means a lot of the mega tech companies that have been up in such a big way this year, up more than 100% are down, including Tesla, NVIDIA down for that reason, but also in sympathy with the fact that Intel has planned to build a new manufacturing plant in Israel. And then the airlines are also lower, as the 3 big airlines, Delta being shown here, down about 3%, as they are paring their flights to Israel amid the conflict, trading lower. Again, a risk-off tone as this conflict between Israel and Hamas does enter a third day.
Abby, thank you. More from Abigail around the opening bout. Coming up, the U.S. pledging its support for Israel.
In this moment of tragedy, I want to say to them and to the world and to terrorists everywhere that the United States stands with Israel.
Instability in the Middle East sending oil prices sharply higher. More on the market implications next.
In this moment of tragedy, I want to say to them and to the world and to terrorists everywhere that the United States stands with Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks.
Crude oil rallying after Hamas's surprise attack on Israel. The threat of US and Iran entanglement growing, especially if action is taken against Tehran. Sok Jin weighing in on the market implications, writing this: in terms of risk premium, we see an increase of $5 to $10 per barrel. The risk of escalation is real, and while Iran may not have nuclear weapons, it does have a stranglehold on the Straits of Hormuz, through which 20 to 30% of global crude oil flows. Joining us now, a man who knows a little something about the crude market, Stuart Wallace out of Dubai. Stuart, you and the team, as you look at things right now, have you changed your expectations on crude supply coming out of the region?
Not so far. I mean, it is absolutely true to say they have a stranglehold over Hormuz, but, you know, with the proviso that no one has ever successfully managed to take Hormuz down for any length of time. So you can definitely make life more difficult. But I would also argue in the long term, it's not necessarily in the interest of Iran to do that. I mean, for one thing, just to remind to everyone, you've got the US Fifth Fleet sitting up in Manama, not that far away. Is that really sort of a bear you want to prod? I think the second leg of it, which is tougher sanctions, you know, or at least a more careful control of what's coming out of Iran, you know, that certainly is a possibility. And at a time when OPEC is still constraining supply, that would clearly have a more immediate impact on the market. So I think it's those two factors, but of the two of them, the more likely approach, at least for now, seems to be on the sanctions. But again, we'll watch and wait.
Stuart, how much crude has been coming out of Iran over the last year or so? And has the administration been turning a blind eye to that?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily as a blind eye, but yes, it is up sharply, and it's definitely been a big factor in the market. I mean, I think as one of your previous guests said, it's something in the order of about 50% over the last 12 months higher. And the expectation is that that would continue to go higher. Now, clearly the calculus has changed in the last few days, and we're really watching Washington to see how they're going to react to this. Again, that will take several weeks or several months to play out. At the same time, you've got this big calculation to make about how then, in turn, does OPEC react, Saudi Arabia in particular. It's got quite a great deal of spare capacity right now, but it's not quite clear what the appetite in Riyadh is at the moment. In a scenario where Iran is constrained, does Riyadh then reopen the spigots? It's very hard to gauge today what that reaction might be.
Stuart, thank you, sir, for your assistance from Dubai this morning. Kristen Bidley, Luke Hickmore back with us. Luke, you made a good point. You don't see this as maybe inflationary risk. You see this as a break to growth. Why, Luke? Why the latter and not the former?
I think if this had happened 6 months ago, obviously they wouldn't have hit the anniversary they wanted to hit. But if this had happened 6 months ago, we would have been higher inflation, lower interest rates. It would have fueled inflationary growth from here. But this is happening just at the point where we're probably peak interest rates, maybe getting close to peak yields, maybe a little bit higher to go, but peak yields. And it feels like consumers are suffering already. You throw in even more things to take money out of their pockets every month. I'm not sure they have the scope to really push hard on more and more and more wages. And of course, that's one of the things we saw on Friday. Wage growth was not coming back whilst employment remained strong.
Kristen, in about 20 seconds, do you agree?
I agree. I think this is more a sign towards what could be a slowing economic growth environment. And so this idea that it would put further pressure on the consumer, we're already seeing soft demand watch in China, in Europe, and in the US, which is spreading when it comes from an oil perspective. So I think this actually leads to more questions around growth than inflation.
Kristen, thank you. Kristen Bidley there and Luke Hickmore. We turn now to the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, both holding a moment of silence.
Iran supports the Shia militias in Iraq. They're trying to establish a beachhead, a terrorist beachhead against Israel and Syria. Now our working assumption is that they may have. Our working assumption a couple days ago was that they hadn't known about it directly. Now it is unclear, and we'll have to wait to verify it. And, when we make an official statement, we'll make an official statement. You can imagine the sense of disgust that we have. We have to send a message to all of Israel's enemies because we're a strong country, but we're tiny, and we can go from strength to vulnerability. I think people are going to see the strength of Israel, the might of Israel.
That was Ron Dermer, the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, on Bloomberg Surveillance earlier on this morning. Joining us now is Katie Lights out of Washington, D.C. for the latest. Morning, Katie.
Good morning, John. Well, that, of course, is on the Israeli side, where we have seen hundreds of Israelis killed in these attacks over the weekend. And, of course, we have confirmation now this morning from the State Department that 9 American citizens are among those that were killed. Of course, here in Washington, you have seen really a bipartisan condemnation of what is happening in the Middle East at the moment. President Biden has pledged to continue to support Israel, which, of course, is a crucially important American ally in the Middle East. There are a few challenges here, though, John, one being that if Israel asks for any further aid that requires congressional approval, it's going to be difficult to get that in an expedient matter, considering the Senate is not in session, the House is not either, and there is no Speaker of the House to preside over the normal legislative business of that chamber. Then, of course, there is the issue that we were just hearing about, alluded to there, the issue of Iran. Remembering just last month, the U.S. released $6 billion in frozen funds in exchange for the return of hostages from Iran. There is a lot of question now about the role Iran has played, how U.S. policy may or may not have factored in. And then, of course, there's the reaction to the intelligence failure that was here, knowing that there was a real lapse in intelligence, that these attacks were not seen coming by both Israeli intelligence. And, of course, there is U.S. intelligence that could play a role there as well. So a lot of questions that remain unanswered, but the U.S. is promising to be there for Israel at this point.
Particularly how policy comes together, given the dysfunction we've seen in Washington, D.C. over the last several months. Katie, thank you. More from Katie Lyons and Bloomberg's Anne-Marie a little bit later on this hour. We'll catch up with them in about 20 minutes. Just to turn to the broader price action, we're shaping up as follows on the S&P 500. We are turning just a little bit higher. We're off session highs. We're down by about 0.4% on the S&P. In the bond market, yields are unchanged on treasuries because they are not trading. We're looking at the bond market at the moment, where yields were lower through much of this morning. And in foreign exchange on a euro, 105.46. Coming up, Hamas's surprise attack on Israel threatening to inflame tensions in the Middle East. JMP Group's Mark Lehman joins us at the opening bell. Your cash open just around the corner. We're 24 seconds away from the opening bell this morning. Good morning. We're pulling back on the S&P. On the Nasdaq, we're down about 0.5% on the S&P 500, down by 0.7% on the Nasdaq. Best weekly gain on the S&P 500 last week since the 1st of September. The opening bell for a new week goes off right now. Switch to the board against the bond market. Yields look like this in the bond market. Treasuries are closed. In the bond market, we saw a rally a little bit earlier on today. Yields a little bit lower, so ignore that price on a 10-year yield in the Treasury market. In the FX market, the euro negative by 0.4%, 105.47. Crude rallying by 3.6%, 85.82. Let's turn to energy stocks and get to Abby. Morning, Abby.
Good morning, John. And we do right now have the shares of Chevron along with other energy stocks trading higher. This, of course, after Israel did order the shutdown of a key gas field in Israel as the violence rages. We have, as a result, natural gas rallying in a huge way. And you can see Chevron and some of the other big energy companies are rallying. Natural gas in Israel has really transformed that economy over the last couple of decades and turned it into an exporter of the fuel. This stoppage has, of course, resulted in lower onward shipments or even delays after Egypt was planning to resume liquefied natural gas exports. In any case, there is a supply shortage for natural gas. So European natural gas up again more than 10%. As for oil, as you were mentioning, there is the question of whether or not Iran is going to be dragged into what the role of Iran will be in this conflict. Will they get sucked in, as Luke Hickmore of Aberdeen was saying, Oil, of course, is rallying right now, both WTI and Brent up about 3 to 4%. Investors really trying to figure out what the scope of this regional conflict will be. And Luke Hickmore, of course, also making that interesting observation that if oil does rise, and he was even saying Jordan and Russia could potentially get sucked in, that it would be a break on growth rather than inflationary. Too early to know that, of course, but what we do know, John, today is that the energy complex is rallying on this conflict between Israel and Hamas.
Abby, thank you. About 2 minutes into the session, we pulled back by 0.4% on the S&P, on the Nasdaq down by about 0.8. Let's get to the airlines. Simone Foxman has the story. Hey, Simone.
Hey, John. Yeah, the FAA warning airlines about travel to the region. And the president of the Allied Pilots Association, which represents 15,000 American Airlines pilots, says it is not prudent or appropriate to knowingly put our flight crews and passengers in harm's way by maintaining flights to a war zone, also directing all pilots to cease flight operations to Israel until they can be reasonably reassured of the region's safety and security. Shares of all the big three in the United States down. Delta down 4.8%. United and American both falling in early trading, down well over 4% as well. This has been a big hit to European carriers in trading as well. Lufthansa Group just saying it canceled Tel Aviv flights through October 14th. Interesting to note which airlines, though, are still flying. British Airways, Iberia Express, both of those owned by IAG. IAG shares down more than 5% in London. Emirates Fly Dubai also still flying. Now, this may be in partly a reaction to the jump in oil prices. We've already seen the big three, as well as airlines across the world, warn about rising fuel prices and how that would take a hit on its third quarter earnings. Also, it's going to be a challenge for these airlines to avoid Israeli airspace. Think about Syrian airspace already closed, Ukraine, Russia. So it may incur some additional costs for these airlines to fly around that space. We will continue, but the mood clearly negative in the airline sector this morning, John.
Delta down close to 5%. American Airlines off by 4.8. Simone, thank you. Let's turn to chips. NVIDIA and Applied Materials are being dragged down over the potential impact of Intel's plans to build a new manufacturing plant in Israel. Ed Ludlow has the story. Hey, Ed.
Yeah, good morning, Jonathan. Intel already has around 12,000 people in Israel. In June, it confirmed a plan to build a wafer fab, which was due to be operational by 2027, a $25 billion deal, according to Netanyahu at the time. And so now there's concern about what might happen with that. And how that might impact the industry's plans to try and diversify its supply chain away from Southeast Asia. You'll remember that, excuse me, last month, Intel also had to walk away for a deal to buy Tower Semi, another Israeli company, because China's regulator didn't approve the deal in time. I'd also take a look at shares of Mobileye, Jonathan, down almost 6% in the session. This is actually Israel's biggest company by market cap. It's US listed, but based in Jerusalem. The company told me this morning that their operations have not been impacted by the attack at the weekend. But I'm told by sources that they had planned to hold a significant investor day next month, November 14th or 15th. And now the timing of that investor day and a technology demo is being reviewed because of what happened at the weekend and security concerns. Also, take a look at NVIDIA. It has cancelled its AI summit, which was due to be held October 15th and 16th in Tel Aviv, citing basically the safety and well-being of those that were due to attend. So when we look about the technology sector, Israel, of course, deep ties to the tech sector globally, a center of innovation, takes a lot of VC dollars. But in the chip sector, that's where we're seeing the reaction in the market this morning.
Ed, thank you, sir. Looking out for your coverage a little bit later today, noon Eastern, Bloomberg Technology with Ed Ludlow and Caroline Hyde. Let's turn to defense. Those stocks jumping as they benefit from the geopolitical risk, with more defense spending possibly on the horizon. Katie Greifeld has this. Hey, Katie.
Hey, John. Yeah, aerospace and defense stocks, natural beneficiaries of this geopolitical conflict. Today is no exception, particularly in Europe. You saw the likes of German sensor maker Hensoldt rally as much as 13%, while Swedish defense company Saab climbed nearly 10% as well. You take a look stateside. Currently, you have Lockheed Martin up about 7.5%. And the logic is straightforward that you just walked through. You have greater government spending on defense that benefits those companies' share prices. That logic has been at work all year in this sector. If you take a look at Goldman Sachs' basket of European defense stocks, It's up nearly 28% so far this year, posted its best day in a year today. You compare that to the stock 600, only up about 4.5% in 2023.
Kelly, thank you for the update. Lockheed Martin there up by more than 7%. Early in the session, about 6 minutes in, we're down here by 0.4%, down about 1 percentage point on the NASDAQ. I want to continue the conversation now with JMP Group's Mark Lehman. Mark, it's been a while. It's good to catch up, sir. Had a series of guests this morning talking up safety. Safety will have a different definition to different people, Mark. What's the definition of safety to you?
Well, today, safety is buying oil and defense stocks and selling technology stocks and obviously selling stocks that are domiciled in Israel. And I think that's the knee-jerk reaction and unsurprising, and it'll become more clear what the reaction will be long-term over time. But for today, this is exactly what you would expect. Interesting, obviously, with the bond market closed because of the holiday, seeing what would happen with that.
A tech stock's a form of defense for you, Mark.
Yes, the tech stocks are definitely what people are interested in today. Unfortunately, that's going to be the call all over the street for the next few days, because clearly this is not going to be a short conflict. This is going to be a conflict that takes some time. And unfortunately, that's going to be the rallying cry globally, because this is not just Israel. This is all over the globe right now with what's going on in Ukraine and in other geographies.
I've asked a few guests this question this morning already, Mark. I'd love to get your thoughts on it, whether you do think this can lead to a durable headwind to market sentiment. I sense from your early comments that you do.
Well, this is not going to be quick, and I think there's a real problem, I think, with people finding sustainability with the rally, potentially, obviously, with what's going on with rates domestically and what's going on with our economy. I think there's just this is another thing that we did not worry about a week ago that we're going to be worried about for a very long time. And I think this kind of instability that is going on globally. Obviously, we're going into an election year next year, which is very troubling sometimes for the stock market. Now you have more to worry about. When you have more to worry about, you sell. And that's what I think is going to take a little bit of the wind out of a potential rally going into year end.
It's always difficult to know what to do with these things, Mark. Just looking at the move we're seeing in crude at the moment, WTI is up by more than 4%, 86.20, Brent crude up by about 3.7%, 87.70. I've been asking whether this would contribute to inflation risk, upside inflation risk going forward. Luke Hickmore of Aberdeen said he thinks this puts the brakes on growth. Is that the way you see it, the latter and not the former?
I think it's the right question. I think it's really hard to gauge this, 72 hours or so into the conflict. I think this is clearly going to be inflationary in the near term, and it's going to cause a little bit of panic in some of those global markets and energy. And I think that will probably put a lid on things. But we had some other things that were dampening down inflation in the fourth quarter. I think this will add to that. And I think, again, we've probably seen the Fed, which was potentially going to be on hold anyway. This probably adds the fuel to that narrative that they may not have to raise in the next cycle.
Mark, for much of the last decade, inflation was low. It was predictable. Can we finish there? Just how much has things changed in the last few years? How different is this regime?
It's funny, Jonathan, I was on Friday. I spent some time with some portfolio managers at a large mutual fund complex here, and we talked just about that. And we talked about how jarring this is for the investor base. But we also talked about where the normal was way back when, frankly, my career started, where you kind of had the 3 to 4% kind of targets and things like that in terms of growth, in terms of interest rates being kind of in the zip code, what we were used to before this. And they said, you know what, it ain't so bad. And I think that will become the narrative in 2024. Let's put a little bit of the politics aside. Let's put a little bit of the tragedy that's going on in Israel aside and talk a little bit about that. And that's not so bad. And they said predictability of that rate backdrop is far better than the fear of higher rates versus the zeros we've had for so long.
Mark, thank you, sir, for the insight. Mark Lehman there of JMP Securities. You brought a market at the moment about 10 minutes into the session, down 1/3% on the S&P, on the NASDAQ down by 0.9. Lots of talk about the Federal Reserve. Not much talk of that this morning whatsoever, but one big headline across the Bloomberg in the last hour. The Fed president out of Dallas, Lori Logan, saying high yields may mean less need to raise rates, in line with what we heard from Mary Daly, the San Francisco Fed president. to Bloomberg's Lisa Abramowitz last week at the Economic Club in New York. So there it is again. Dallas Fed President Lori Logan saying higher yields may mean less need to raise interest rates. Betty talked about this morning the bond market, the Federal Reserve, and the fact we get a CPI print a little bit later on this week. Again, if you're just joining us, about 11 minutes into the session, we are pulling back on the S&P 500 by about 1/3%, down about 0.9% on the Nasdaq. Coming up, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer confronting President Xi over Israel.
I also made a request, a direct request to President Xi, that the foreign ministry strengthen their statement on the Middle East.
Team coverage up next.
I also made a request, a direct request to President Xi, that the foreign ministry strengthen their statement on the Middle East, which didn't even mention the loss of the horrible, gut-wrenching loss of civilian life. I'm gratified the foreign ministry issued a new statement that did condemn the loss of civilian life.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer urging President Xi Jinping to stand with Israel during a visit to Beijing after China reiterated support for an independent Palestinian state. The bipartisan delegation of U.S. senators arriving in China seeking economic reciprocity. This as key seats remain empty on Capitol Hill, including House Speaker and Ambassador to Israel. The House set to cast speakership votes on Wednesday. Democratic lawmakers reportedly pushing for a quick confirmation of Biden's nominee for Ambassador to Israel, Jack Lew, in an upcoming October 18th hearing. Your team coverage starts right now with Bloomberg's Anne-Marie in New York, Katie Lyons down in Washington, D.C. AMH, good morning.
Good morning, John. What you see here when you have Senator Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Crapo going over to China. First, it was very unusual because remember in June, Xi Jinping sat down with Secretary Blinken, but he didn't sit down with other Biden cabinet officials, but he decided to take a congressional meeting. And what Chuck Schumer did there, the Senate Majority Leader, is he wanted to make first and foremost that he was really annoyed with China's statement over the weekend regarding the attack on Israeli civilians from Hamas. That statement didn't even mention Hamas and just called for, de-escalating of tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. That was the first order of business and really overshadowed this meeting, Jonathan, was supposed to be about economic fairness, was supposed to be at fentanyl coming into the United States, and also about human rights abuses in China.
You've raised this question. How did the Senate Majority Leader get a meeting that so many others have struggled to get?
Well, it's a great question. We do know that in 2015, Xi Jinping decided to meet with congressional leaders when he was in Washington, D.C. on a state visit. Potentially, he feels that he does need to make those inroads in Congress, especially on a bipartisan basis, because, Jonathan, there is one issue that brings Democrats and Republicans together on Capitol Hill, and that has to do with confronting China.
Katie, we keep going back to this, the prospect of escalation abroad, the dysfunction at home. Let's talk about the dysfunction at home. No speaker in the House, no ambassador to Israel, to Egypt, to Lebanon. Katie, does that complicate things in any way, shape or form?
It certainly does, especially just in terms of expediency, John. How quickly the Congress, for example, would be able to approve further aid to Israel if necessary when you don't have an operational House of Representatives at the moment. And also the Senate is not even in session, which is why the consideration of Jack Lew for the post of Israeli ambassador, that confirmation hearing isn't even going to happen until next week. And while Democrats are pushing for his confirmation to happen quickly, if there is not unanimous consent in the Senate to accelerate that process, it risks being prolonged. Then, of course, in the House, it really is a question of when there will be a House Speaker once again. Of course, that is something the Republicans are going to try to answer this week. Lawmakers will be returning to Washington tonight. Tomorrow, the Republican conference will have a closed-door meeting in which they will hear from both of the candidates for Speaker. At this point, John, there are only two. Jim Jordan from Ohio, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, who appeals more to the hard right flank of the Republican Party, and Steve Scalise, a longtime member of House leadership, one that likely will appeal to more moderates. The difficulty, though, John, is that it's really unclear at this point that either of them could get the requisite 217 votes that they need in order to actually get the Speaker's gavel. So we could be looking here had a protracted fight to even get someone at the helm of the House of Representatives who is able to see legislation be put to the floor and voted on. It really just delays everything. And of course, it just adds to the optics of dysfunction in the U.S. at home, which obviously casts a shadow as to what the U.S. is doing abroad as well.
More and more delays. AMH, with that in mind, do the tragic events of the weekend inspire change for you in Washington? Are we going to actually really get a sense of urgency that we haven't had for a long time?
Well, potentially. There is that urgency that Kayleigh just spoke about, which is about moving ahead with these postings in the Middle East, like Jack Lew, who is nominated by the president in September to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Now that the confirmation potentially will be moved up. We know that he's going to have a committee hearing starting next week. So there is a little bit more impetus for Washington to start making some moves. On the House side, though, Jonathan, to Kayleigh's point, it is going to be difficult to get to 217, but potentially this starts to make these Republicans feel the need to coalesce around an individual sooner rather than later. People will talk about this could take days or weeks. Maybe they wrap it up sooner.
Anne-Marie, we understand the optics of all this. It looks terrible to have no ambassadors in key positions in a situation like this one, in a region where we need them right now. How significant is it, just when it comes to putting together policy and a response to the events of the weekend?
I got to be honest with you. Most people I talk to say they just don't care who the ambassador is. A lot of these ambassadors are political appointees. And the fact of the matter is, on the ground, what you do have is staff that have been there for years that are doing the work. You have charge d'affaires that are doing the work, like we have in Jerusalem right now. So, yes, optically, does it look good? Definitely not. But is it changing anything on the ground? Probably not. Also, when you look at the Middle East and how they have a dialogue with Washington, D.C., a lot of it actually happens in Washington, D.C., with the Saudi ambassador in Washington, with the Qatar ambassador in Washington. A lot of the dialogue is a little bit more direct with the West Wing and those nations.
MH, thank you. The update there from Anne-Marie and Kelly Lyons in New York and Washington, D.C., respectively. About 21 minutes into the session, we're off the lows. On the S&P 500, we're down about 0.2%. On the Nasdaq, we're down about 0.5%. If you want to turn to some bond market action, turn to Germany. That market is open. Yields are lower by about 4 basis points on a German 10-year. That haven bid, classic risk aversion, textbook stuff, seen it all morning. See it in the bond market. Clearly buns, even with the backdrop over the last few months, retaining some risk mitigation characteristics. In the FX market, the dollar stronger. We expect to see dollar strength. You see it in G10. The euro down to about 105.52 on a euro negative 0.3%. And in the commodity market, rallying by about 3%. Not a major move, given what we've seen so far. Last week, remember, worst week for crude going back to March. Biggest weekly loss since spring. 85 on WTI. On Brent crude, about 87. Positive 2.9%. With a sector price action on this equity market, let's get to Abby for more. Hey, Abby.
Hey, John. Well, we are looking at a smaller decline, a paired decline to your point. The S&P 500 down about 0.25%. But the sector composition really shaped by the conflict in the Middle East. Consumer discretionary, the worst sector on the day, down 1.4%. It's your cruise lines, your airlines, the Airbnbs of the world, the Expedias, the Booking.coms, hotels. Those are the worst laggards on fears that this conflict really could weigh on global travel. To the upside, energy down up 2.4%. Industrials higher on the defense contractors. But here are those airlines over since the July 13th peak, John, down about 31% as oil took a toll on the airlines. Oil rising, more recently, to your point, oil reversed. But now, as we have airlines pulling back some of their services to Israel, and again, fears that it could impact global travel, airlines down on the day and over that time period pretty drastically.
Abby, thank you. The latest on the price action. A lot still to come this week. On the economic front, tons of data, PPI, CPI, a lot of Fed speak in the mix as well. Looking ahead to the Federal Reserve meeting, only several weeks away. Coming up next, your trading diary.
This was the largest operational and intelligence failure in the history of the Israeli military and Israeli government.
It's quite clear that the Israelis underestimated their adversary, simply couldn't comprehend the notion, even though the idea of Hamas operatives tunneling, Hezbollah operatives in the north tunneling, had been a major concern of Israel before.
Do not expect anything, and that is going any kind of peace or calm in the next 36 hours, and probably this is going to bleed over into international markets.
The complexity of this attack from Hamas's perspective was not only incredibly successful, but it was incredibly impressive. And I think U.S. officials, Israeli officials, are going to have to really re-examine some of their base assumptions going forward.
The reaction to the tragic events over the weekend in Israel. The price action slightly negative by 0.2%. The trading diary, the week ahead looks like this. Fed Governor Jefferson speaks at 1:30 Eastern. Tuesday, more Fed speak. Wednesday, PPI and FOMC minutes. Then on to Thursday, more data, US CPI and jobless claims. And on Friday, big banks kick off with JP Morgan earnings. From New York, this was the countdown to the open. This is Bloomberg.